growing in the pandemic? They own the present. Are they about to colonize even our future? Let's have a look.
The net worth of American billionaires has soared by $1 trillion since March, according to a new report.
I believe so powerfully in the ability of entrepreneurial capitalism and free markets to solve so many of the world's problems. Not all of them.
It's going well so far.
Not all of them, but so many of them.
Of course, people talk about, progress. They'll point to medieval France or something and like someone coughing up a lump of plague in a public square. Of course, entrepreneurial capitalism has provided many things, but I think sometimes that we deify it because we don't look at the costs, because sometimes the costs are harder to evaluate. Billionaires have carbon footprints that are thousands of times higher than those of average Americans. They own yachts, planes, multiple mansions, all of which contribute greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Here's an interesting quote from Evgeny Morozov, the author. He says, "Silicon Valley is a bizarre mix of greedy capitalists and cultural Marxists, keen on indoctrinating their users into left-wing ideas while getting filthy rich off everyone's data." And also, further to the start of this video, US billionaires' wealth has risen by over $1 trillion during the pandemic. A report by Oxfam concluded that Jeff Bezos' worth had climbed so much between March and September 2020 that he could have given all 876,000 Amazon employees a $105,000 bonus and still have been as wealthy as he was before the pandemic. That's mental. Every single one of that's not even a few employees, 876, all them people dropping stuff off to your house in a van, could have given them 105 grand each and still been as, it would have made no difference.
You look at the top 100 landowners in America, they now own 33 million acres. That's according to the Land Report 100. That's up 18% since 2008. And some of the names on this list may surprise you. Jeff Bezos is actually the 25th biggest landowner in the U.S.
We've talked to you before about farmland ownership with billionaires, notably, of course, Bill Gates, but also Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. He owns 420,000 acres of land, mainly in West Texas. So they own cyberspace, they own the land that we stand upon. Now, space itself, the final frontier, is about to become just another item in their portfolio.
It is potentially the next giant leap in private space travel. SpaceX has announced it's sending a Japanese billionaire up around the moon.
I hope they've told him first. We're sending a Japanese billionaire out around the moon. What's going on? I'm trying to have my breakfast.
Yusaku Maezawa. His pocket's deep enough, deep as the moon is high above the earth, and that's what it's going to take, really, to get there.
It's being jauntily reported, but we're living in a time of massive inequality, suffering and poverty and frustration, not just, of course, in places like India, where the farming protests are destabilizing the country, or at least challenging authority about the way that the country is organized, but in countries where it was taken for granted that we had a stable way of life. The pandemic has induced poverty, doubt and uncertainty. So I suppose I can't share in the kind of journey, there's a billionaire being flown around the moon.
We still continue to be captivated by space.
Yeah. Look at who else is out there. We got Virgin Galactic by Richard Branson. We also have Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos from Amazon fame. So this is really heating up.
This is interesting, isn't it? So on one hand, you have a future for a few institutions and people that is literally opening up the cosmos, where elsewhere we're seeing dereliction, decimation, destruction and suffering. Matt Shaw said, "A majority of compelling and visible ideas about tomorrow are being conceived and developed by a tiny minority of ultra-wealthy individuals and private sector companies. It's not hard to see the seductive appeal of these visions of the future. Beautiful digital renderings invite us into glowing and highly conceptual worlds, such as Elon Musk and SpaceX's plan to build a glass-domed colony on Mars, or Jeff Bezos' plan for floating space colonies. On Earth, Richard Branson's Virgin Hyperloop One has worked with top architects around the world to produce spectacular, inspiring images of a world connected by zero emissions, 670 mile/hour vacuum-propelled pods, Uber imagining self-flying taxis." This is, in a sense, a continuation of the ideology that's got us into this mess in the first place, that by using the mindset of capitalism, and no doubt that capitalism has brought about excellence, entrepreneurialism and ingenuity in many areas, but in the extreme form that we're experiencing it now, it creates a lot of problems. Bringing the focus to potential space colonization, for me, seems like it's compounding the negligence and lack of awareness that we're currently suffering from, toiling under. What I feel we ought to be focusing on is how do we create a fairer, more just society here on Earth, rather than should we get a dome up on Mars that can have some poor sods from Indonesia working on it while a few people live it up drinking cocktails in a literal glass bubble.
Think we'll ever have Amazon fulfillment centers on the moon?
That's a very good question.
I feel that's too much power there, Jeff Bezos.
It's time to go back to the moon, this time to stay.
I can't think of any experience that anyone's going to have in their life that will be more wonderful, extreme than going to space.
Accessibility to space tourism remains limited to the richest of the rich, with ticket prices ranging from hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions.
Also, I suppose what it shows is that we are moving from state-sponsored space travel to private space travel. Now, you can query, is one better than the other? Of course, the sort of the moon landings in the 60s and space travel by the Soviet Union defined that era, a kind of a spirit of exploration and, of course, notably competition. But perhaps this is an indicator of the fact that elites have abandoned ordinary people. It's interesting to see that nationalism is on the rise and surging when in fact it's clear now to observe that there is a strata of society that exists beyond the reach of any national project. It's interesting how there has always been this kind of concern about immigration, and I can't help but think that our attention is drawn to this obsession around immigration, because it distracts us from the fact that there have always been an elite group of economically privileged international citizens of globalization able to exploit the world, and it's pretty clear in this case who they are, and in any case they are identifiable by their actions and by their wealth.
Virgin Galactic and social capital head of Sophia merging to form the world's first and only publicly traded human spaceflight company.
Others are questioning the massive amounts of money being spent on developing space tourism when we have some very pressing issues to deal with right here on Earth.
I'm not, again, encouraging a sort of persecuting attitude of any individual. I think these individuals can be drawn from anywhere, but the fact is that we are living within systems that create this problem. Without systemic change, you know, in a way they're no different from all people having balloon races and getting involved in crazy ventures, you know, in the Victorian era, or colonization and people sailing in great galleons across the sea to conquer new territories. Well, those territories weren't new. They were occupied by human beings, and only now we're beginning to unpick the social and cultural problems that were created by this attitude, by this idea that individuals, great individuals, can conquer these unknown territories, these uncharted worlds. The fact is that there are limitless realms within all of us, a shared space, a shared connection between all of us, and unless we change our focus, I feel that we will create precisely this future, where billions of people live in poverty and decimation, and an elite literally live in domed spaces, live in bunkers, live in capsules, hurtle around the world. And this has been presented to us as somehow attractive and ingenious, rather than what it is, a kind of betrayal of our shared humanity, a betrayal of our planet, a betrayal of the bonds and ties that connect all of us, which ought surely be what we primarily pursue on our limited individual time here on this planet.
Based on the ticket prices that we've seen today, the pace of development that we see, and the supply that we have forecasted, NSR projects that the revenue sizing represents a $14 billion cumulative opportunity.
In a sense, we are pursuing goals in a material way that could be pursued spiritually. We do require an awakening. We do require an expedition. We do all need to go on a journey. But it's not a gas-guzzling trip to the outer reaches of space. It's a retreat within to discover our shared humanity. But when we awaken, when the awakening comes, we see that we are all here together, that our apparent separation is an illusion fortified by the senses and the limitations of the senses, that there is a deep oneness. If our systems and goals are derived from an understanding of our oneness, we will create fairer, more just more sustainable, more beautiful systems. Instead of focusing on how many billionaires we can shoot off around the moon and how many glorious Epcot centres in the sky we can create, why don't we together foster and nurture a shared vision together of our own independently run, democratic communities where we can be free, where we can be who we are, where we can explore space, inner and outer, together. But in order to do that, we are going to have to put aside some of these systems that continually create opportunity and advantage for an elite few.
None of these people, or almost none of them, there are a couple of exceptions, have come forward to say like Jeffrey Bezos, I have $200 billion. If I give away half of it to help my fellow citizens, I'll still be the richest person in this country, but it'll be $100 billion more to help out my fellow citizens. The harshness of America is that they don't even think about that, and that's a sign of a society falling apart.
In this brilliant book, The Creation of Consciousness by Edward Edinger, the great Jungian scholar writes, history and anthropology teach us that human society cannot long survive unless its members are psychologically contained within a central living myth. Such a myth provides the individual with a reason for being. It is evident to thoughtful people that Western society, and this includes Marxism, capitalism, all Western ideas, no longer has a viable functioning myth. Indeed, all the major world cultures are approaching to a greater or lesser extent the state of mythlessness. Adam Curtis's documentary is about that. Whether you're in China, America, Russia, the UK, mythlessness. We have no overriding idea of who we are and what we're supposed to be achieving. The breakdown of a central myth is like the shattering of a vessel containing a precious essence. The fluid is spilled and drains away, soaked up by the surrounding undifferentiated matter. Meaning is lost. In its place, primitive and atavistic contents are reactivated. Differentiated values disappear and are replaced by the elemental motivations of power and pleasure. Look around your society now. Power and pleasure are the dominating forces because we have no containing myth. People are interested in what they can control, and the rest of us that don't have access to that kind of power distract ourselves through pleasure, through eating, pornography, consuming, addiction, or else the individual is exposed to emptiness and despair. Again, addiction, illness, etc. With the loss of awareness of a transpersonal reality, God, that's one way of looking at God. You know, like the state for a while performed the function of that transpersonal reality, but that's broken down now. That doesn't function as a myth, is what's being said. The inner and outer anarchies of competing personal desires take over. So, what we're experiencing in any of the great falling societies of the world is the end of a shared vision. We need a new shared myth. Where will it come from? If you're interested in continuing this conversation with old Russ, please like and subscribe. Join up to my mailing list. You never know when I might need direct access to you. Go to russellbrand.com and sign up.